to give an introduction on Professor Asahiro. For a few summers, I have brought students to Kyushu University and had collaborations with you, and very fond memories of those times. And the last workshop we did was actually on a disaster site at the outskirts of Kyushu. We learned a lot about Japanese forests, and we came face to face with the aftermath of the massive flooding and the rebuilding of that neighborhood. So it's extremely interesting. And as Professor Makoto mentioned yesterday in his lecture, that Japanese has learned to have an amazing resilience towards natural disasters. Professor Asahiro is currently Associate Professor at the Division of Landscape and Social Environmental Design Department of the Faculty of Environmental Design at the Kyushu University, Japan. And he has a PhD in design and specialization in landscape conservation. And being a graduate of the Department of Environmental Design himself at the Kyushu Institute of Design, he also had studied architecture and urban design, landscape and ecological planning. And Professor Asahiro practiced as an urban design consultant. And after a few years, he returned to school to focus on education and research work. His interests are based on nature and local community conservation on rural countryside. He specializes in Satoyama, which means human-oriented farming environment, like woodland, terrace rice paddies, and so on. And they have collaborated with local organic farming NPO and British Trust for Conservation Volunteer, and carried out conservation and mountain farming projects from 1998 to 2008. And he also conducted deforestation research in Taknif Peninsula in Bangladesh from 2012 and published an article on deforestation in the Taknif Peninsula of Bangladesh in 2017. And since 2012, actually, Dr. Asahiro has focused on post-disaster research on these farming society communities. With this research work, he has been awarded the Landscape Research Award in 2018 by the Asian Landscape Design Society. So today we are very happy to see you. Hope you are still okay. It's only an hour, then you can go back to sleep. Okay, please take it away, Professor Asahiro.
Yeah, it is much appreciated such a telling my introduction. Today, thank you for joining us and inviting me at today's lecture. I'm very glad to hear me. My English is not so good, so if you have some unknown thing, please give me the question later on. So I'll start my presentation. I'll share my slide. Can you see it?
Yes.
Oh,
okay.
Okay, I'll start. So, wait a minute. Okay. Today I prepare several topics. I hope you have some interested from my slide. The first one is the I and KU exchange things. And second one, think resilience on disaster in this urbanization time. It refers the Professor Hayashi's slide. And third one, issue on rural countryside, especially step party in mountain area, post-conservation volunteer, then recovery volunteer after disaster, then reforestation as disaster sites, and community bonding after disaster, And last, I add the socially engaged art activity in rural countryside. The topic is a bit broad, but please see it. First, the I and KU exchange. So my Kyushu University plays Fukuoka City, north part of Kyushu Island in Japan. Our campus is School and Graduate School of Design, which composed 5 courses: environment, industrial, media, acoustic, and future design. So already Sylvia mentioned our exchange from 2016. I visited our campus and we hold a one-day workshop in KU. Then after we got agreement on academic cooperation, then 2018, we did landscape restoration design in the mountain damaged area in Asakura. We've coordinated a workshop on disaster site in 2018. The site, Asakura City near Fukuoka, it was struck flood disaster in 2017. This region had rained 1,000 millimeters in a day. So this amount of rain was Japan record class rain. It was. I and our students joined and do collaboration work, design work, and present the restoration image of the village. Later day, our workshop achievement were able to share with local villagers. The community member expressed their appreciation for us. So Sylvia, thank you very much. The other workshop, former workshop. Yeah, we had a lot of fruitful result. And this is a photo of a mountain at the time. So valley to valley, it had a landslide. It's because the real geology of this area is granite. So landslides have occurred in many valleys due to the thick layers of weathered soil. So this is a river. So river shape, it's a kind of shape, S shape drawing. So water overflow the river and the drifting would smash the elementary school. So it was a very devastating thing. It was. So after, we visited this school and had explained from local people. So this is just a photo we were. So Sylvia, Professor Tam Pei-yok, and me, and Jessica Yoon-hee, and Elizabeth Levin, and Leon Sensei ですね. Yeah, it's a nice photo. So, the student presentation, it was, so student proposed a bit higher footpath and connect to the elementary school, second floor. So people are able to evacuate safely at village to school building. And the flooding time, the water comes from the ground. So those are first impressive drawing, but it was so good. And also this image showing the life recovery with the river as a future image. So after the disaster, it is very difficult to drawing such kind of image. But as our landscape architect or landscape architect designing student, it is our role to show in the visual image toward future, not only that several years, but 10 years, 20 years, 30 years later. It is very necessary to involving or cheer up the local people. to the future recovery activity. Yeah. So next, we'd like to think about the resilience on disaster in this urbanization time. So, in fact, our region of Fukuoka had a major flood disaster in 2012. At that time, I applied for funding research grant to investigate agriculture volunteer activities as mutual aid. The organization is called JST RISTEX. RISTEX means a Research Institute of Science and Technology for Society. And JST is Japan Science and Technology Agency. It's a part of national body to accelerate cut-edge science and technology. The program I belong to called Creating Community-Based Robust and Resilient Society. The program supervisor was Professor Hayashi Haruo, President, National Research Institute for Earth Science and Disaster Prevention in Japan. He mentioned on this page, we have scientifically examined the issues and lessons learned from these disasters and have prompted research and development aimed at implementing disaster countermeasures to make our society stronger and more resilient against large-scale disasters that are expected in the future. Today, I'd like to share with you using his slide. So this is the damage reduction model, traditional model of disaster prevention. So D means damage and equal the formula showing that H is hazard. Hazard is a scientific element like a typhoon or earthquake, such a hazard things. Exposure, E is exposure. So how much expose our urban landscape to those hazards? So in this urbanization time, the exposure rate to the hazard is quite increasing. So city planning section dealing this exposure things. V is vulnerability. So civil engineering and building structure to develop the those structural things to against the hard earthquake and overcoming vulnerabilities in these years. This graph shows the death toll after World War II. The number decreased by construction activities, river, dam, and building. Japanese society has not faced big disaster in these 5 decades and forgot the risk and fear. But Professor Yokohari mentioned before the 1995, we had the Hanshin Awaji earthquake, direct earthquake struck the city. It was unexpected hazard. It overcome our assessment, the construction structure. So we experienced this disaster. The number of deaths from this natural disaster, since we found nearly more than 6,000 deaths we had. So those big disaster was not under control. The urban disaster we faced, it's very difficult to make a measure in the future. So this is a model for prevention. So disaster becoming the huge earthquake, and hazard, it's a direct earthquake, and the exposure was urban disaster. So now Japanese academic society face the limitation of the engineering approach. So we are not able to risk make zero in the future. And 2011, we got the Tohoku earthquake and the tsunami disaster. So death toll high up, nearly 20,000. So in the future, earthquake research and promotion headquarters now is the thinking we'll have another earthquake. So most earthquake at plate boundaries, Hokkaido and Kanagawa, and of Western Japan. It's cycled 50 to 200 year cycle that have. Especially seismic intensity distribution map for the largest crust, Nankai through earthquake. It will hit these seashore line of south area of Japan in the future. So I'd like to ask to yours, how many people are estimated to die in a major Nankai through earthquake? So please think. The first is 40,000, second 180,000, third is 320,000. Sylvia, how do you think?
Sylvia.
I'm thinking.
3?
2?
2? Yeah, 180. The correct number is 320,000. It's estimating number for death toll in the future. So, so now, how do we face up to a disaster of this magnitude? So this social scholar people thinking the resilience model, establishing a new paradigm for disaster management. So this is the formula. R is resilience, and D is damage. It's a prevention model, hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. And add A and T. A is human activity, and T is time. So resilience model, we are now thinking of prevention and resilience. So this slide are shown in the phase after striking disaster. So for example, less than 1 hour just after the disaster. So people try to evacuate from the collapsing housing. But if they are not able to evacuate within 3 hours, they need the rescue team. And second phase is saving lives. It's around 3 days. So the 3 days is a limitation of people lives. Third phase is restoring and social flows. It's around 3 days to 1 month or 2 months. So after 3 days, disaster happened. Social welfare center established the volunteer center and starts supporting the the local person who had damage. So until 3 days, those emergency team working for saving life. And rebuilding the social phase is from 1 month to 1 year, 2 year, or 10 years are needed to rebuilding the society. So, so we are thinking. So if we start the research against this resilience research work, we need to clarify which phase we are going to target. So I'm a landscape architect related person. So my targeting phase is restoring social flows and rebuilding the society. So after 1 month to several years to restore. So this is the point to think about resilience research. So now I'd like to change the topic. Issue on rural countryside, especially step paddy in mountain area. So this is my student planting the rice. How we think the importance of cultural landscape in this urbanization time. This figure shows my point of view on thinking the rural countryside issue. So pre-modern life, so the step paddy is it's a cultural things, but those culture are established by nature. Nature means it's high temperature and humidity in Asian climate, and steep terrain also it's an element of the step paddy. So those climate and terrain give us the rich field of landscape and beauty. But on the other hand, flood and landslide. But step paddy are preventing the landslide because of the steps. Those landscapes were managed by local people, especially village community. So they developed the technology and the culture and the lifestyle until pre-modern life. But post-modern life, so modernization bring to rural countrysides. For example, in Japan, rice price reduction is very heavy. And mechanization, it is quite difficult such a step using the machine. So workers tend to outflow from village. So weakening of community, depopulation, reduction of annual events, abandonment of farming field, loss of technology and culture, declining of disaster prevention function. Those are issues that we are facing. So in the future, our commitment to the future is conservation and the use of rural area is very important. So inherited skill and culture, maintaining the disaster prevention. For example, forming a new community with non-farmer combined with new tourism, or developing new industry. So creative city, it is famous, but creative rural community, it is also important for rural invention. So conservation volunteer. So in my college year in Kyushu Institute of Design, I've learned not only architecture, but these landscape things. So Professor Shigematsu, who brought me back to the university, was a specialist in countryside conservation. This is a photo of 1997 to conserve depopulated farming steppe paddy landscape. We have carried out conservation holiday, cooperate with BTCV. This activity continued 10 years. So it is a very nice activity because the volunteer leader and local farmer teaching us the how to put up the stone walling, how to manage the those paddies. So those experience is quite new for urban people. Through these activities, Exchange Center was set up in 2007 in a closed primary school building, which became the office of the NPO Sansonjuku. It's a NPO I have been collaborate in this region. You should. Okay, next recovery volunteer disaster. So in 2012, so this area had torrential rain, and it had severe damage. But we were able to carry out volunteer for agriculture. That's a seldom see in Japan. Since we had experienced conservation volunteers before disaster, the know-how, people networks, equipment, and facilities, so on we have. So it's able to say the usual volunteer works become the preparation for disaster and its resiliency. So later on, I published handbook for volunteer coordinator on agriculture. Now this activity has been conducted every disaster afterward, especially in northern Kyushu area. So, so this area had more than 600 millimeter rain in a day. So erosion start at the mountain. Those forest roads collect the water and make a gully erosion. Then not only the water, but soil and drifting wood search the down farming area, road, village, and devastating those bridge. It's a mountains areas, typical damages process. So this area, so before disaster, they are conserving very well the rice paddy area. So after disaster, they were able to start those volunteer work smoothly. And not only the support activity of such as living and agriculture restoration, but the harvesting and the support for festival. So the support activity ranging is very wide. So after that, I published the booklet, and the Kumamoto earthquake struck in 2016. So I went the volunteer center and telling them that why don't we do the volunteer activity. For example, this is a small street, but bullied by mud and stone. So volunteer so get rid of those stone and bubble in a day. Local residents said, now I can sleep well. They were. And this is a harvesting the rice because lots of debris spreading near the river and in the field. So machines are not able to use for harvesting rice. So it's need to people work, hands-on work for harvesting. So as a volunteer works, it's very nice to do it. So now I changed to reforestation as disaster. So the reforestation project I've carried out two areas. One is Hoshino, it was struck 2012. The other is Hira Enoki, it was struck 2017. The first is a large-scale slope collapse in the Hoshino area caused by the rain. The national government had restored the slope, but because of importance of landscape beauty. So, this is the national government project they done, but it's a landscape beauty place. So Fukuoka Prefecture government funded a project to restore the broad-leaved forest. A private company is undertaking the work, and I'm providing basic planning and advice for them. This red area is a target place plantation. We'd like to think about the cause of the landslide. Heavy rains are the primary cause of these landslides. The second factor is geology and topography. For instance, granite areas are susceptible to weathering, and deep cracks are caused by the inclusion of water on unstable slopes. The third factor to be pointed out is vegetation. Japan's forests cover 25.1 million hectares, but 66% of the country's land area, of which 40% is planted Japanese cedar and cypress as an artificial forest. Post-war afforestation has prevented shallow landslide caused by heavy rain, but these trees, which have not been harvested, are now causing massive damage to river, bridge, and village during heavy rains. We cannot control disaster by forestation alone, but there is a need for reforestation that strengthens the cohesion of the root. Generally, in Japan, tough grass seeds are sown by machine for those slope greening. But considering of landscape and biodiversity, introducing trees is also important. In general, landslide prevention work after disaster have not included slope afforestation. Fukuoka Prefecture had decided and implemented first landscape restoration to the site of after national government recovery work in this time. The soil condition here were not good to the grow trees, since the mixture of gravel, soil left over from the cropland, and those ground had been rolled by heavy machine to ensure the slope stability. So there is no special space making root system. So we've created three soil condition type: direct planting condition, trench condition, and fertilizing condition. The target forest types were selected from the potential natural vegetation in this climate zone, since the local community diffuse forest management in the future. We have selected cherry trees, ginkgo trees, maple, and other shrub and existing in the area. So this photo shows the second year of the planted tree. Those tree growth has been good. One of the findings is that the pioneer tree species and secondary forest species can grow in almost any type of soil. Climax trees and other landscape trees seem to need trenching and fertilization. One of the challenges is to deal with vines such as kudzu. Since the planting density is low, the vine species are growing very fast. In order to deal with this, we are planning to leave the Persian silk tree that grow naturally in the field when we were clearing those vines and grass in summer season. So this is the future image of Hoshino landscape. So next So second, planting for planting activity for community bonding after disaster. So this Hiraenoki area, they ran a fruit orchard called Parsimon. 8 households were completely destroyed by the flooding river and were also affected by landslide. The number of households, which had been 37 before the disaster, decreased by 50% to 18, and many residents left the area. In order to preserve the village for the future, the Recovery Villagers Committee began to plant the flower tree observation spot for villagers as a place to gather, including those households that had left. The university was asked to provide support, and I'm in charge of planning and designing the entire project and supporting the activity. So I do the measurement work and make a model. The criteria to select tree species were native, fit with climate zone, and leaf color and flower. Tree species include cherry blossom, ginkgo, dogwood, maple trees, azalea, and hydrangea. Ginkgo, which has strong roots, have been planted at the ridge since need to prevent slope collapsing. This is a future image that I made. Local people are able to see village scenery together under the cherry flower in spring in the future. We also handmade explanation panel with stainless steel frameworks in our workshop. We mentioned on panel this village history, culture, disaster damage, and this recovery activities. Last March, a tree planting ceremony was held with the participation of villagers and elementary school students. Listen to the songs that were written for this event and performed by local children. Okay. So in the future, we are going to continue this activity. Our labo are planning to measure the growth of tree and take aerial photograph using drone to digitize the change of landscape from season to season, year to year. So last topic, I'd like to introduce the socially engaged art activity. So in Kyushu University Social Art Lab established almost 5 years ago. This lab, it was established in 2016 as a departmental center. The aim is to prevent new value of life through research, education, practice, and advocacy of social art or socially engaged art, which is art practice that commits to social issue and creates new connection between people. Our activities focus not only on art, but also on local environments such as farming and mountain village the social inclusion of people with intellectual or physically disabilities, and the management of technology that supports such a society. I'd like to show 4 types of artworks in rural countryside. First one is a bus tour to the rural countryside. Can it work? So this is bus tour. So we joined the participants and go to the rural countryside and see the rural landscape, and we are having the explanation of disaster or usual farming activity from local people, and also touching the local inherited puppet doll activities. And artists made some artworks. For example, the artist Kotaro Ushijima, he collecting the things from unusing things from local people and hanging from a ceiling and writing. So participant feeling something old memory from the material. So it's quite interesting artworks to share the old memory with local people. The second one is Okuyame Geino Project 2018. Geino means traditional local entertainment. As an artist in residence, artist Riki Takeda joined. He is a Geino archiver, and with 3 volunteers, 2 comes from Hong Kong, the other 1 comes from Lucia, do local farming activity, interviewing 2 farmers, and created new performance.
In Hong Kong, because in Hong Kong we got a very short history. We actually don't have our nationality. I mean, we are belongs to China, but the history of Hong Kong is so short, and I'm so glad that I learned something from here. Is the artists come in, or the social art lab come in, and they interact with the local people, and also they want to find the seed here, to want the plants to grow up.
There's no other way that for you to know the place except you talk with them, with lots of different local people. So even in Hong Kong, right now I would say maybe I'm not so sure what Hong Kong is, because I didn't talk with the neighbors much. Yeah, so I think maybe I would be changed somehow.
In my hometown, I live in Moscow, but my hometown is different, and also have some folk, and they have their songs, have their dances, their culture, and I was never interested in it before, but now when you get there is some meaning.
Yes. So those two volunteers from Hong Kong, they are architect, and the other Lucian volunteer is she's a computer programmer, and they come as a volunteer. But in this creative workshop, it is very nice opportunity to think what is the nature, what is community, what is sustainability from the site. The third one, I'd like to show the soil tasting. The artist's name is James Jack. So soil tasting. So participant, wait a minute, I'll change. Participants bring the soil from their home or field, and each participant becomes sommelier and wearing the nice apron, then explaining what this soil and his usual life, and audience smelling the soil from the grass and feeding and listening the story from the sommelier. So it is quite interesting. It's not wine, it's a soil. So we are able to feel the environment or nurturing how this soil nurtured in his house or field and what story there are. It's a quite nice sharing time. It's on the table, but we feel landscape very well. Okay, fourth one is a cyanotype. Artist is Hiroyo Kaneko. She is photographer. So see this video first. Oh, wait a minute.
With this sunlight, maybe I guess it's going to be take about 10 minutes, and then you can see the color is changing right now. Okay. Gradually.
綺麗綺麗。本当だ、色がまた変わってきた。
Changing color gradually and become such a cyan type photo image.
土地と本当に関わりのあるものを自分たちが働いて。
So he explained so before this cyanotype works, volunteer works on the field and collect the plants and material and put it on the seed and making the artworks. So it's very quite interesting, the work combining not only the work but artworks through this project. Okay, so in these years, I've cooperated with Social Art Lab and artists. We published 2 books, 2018 Social Art Lab, Opening Up the Community and Society, and this year, Art Management and Social Inclusion, Opening the Field of Art to Society. So this activity now going on in the future. So this is the last slide. So I'm everything up and the feedback to us. So huge urban disaster are going to happen in the future. So far, prevention model will do, but resilience model is needed to overcome a super disaster in the future. The resilience model related to human activity. Now we need to make preparation before disaster and need to think target phase. Conservation volunteer before disaster will be very useful for recovery volunteers. And reforestation disaster site is not only the remake the landscape, but useful for community bonding. So socially engaged art, it aims to show landscape value because of urban people and rural people sometimes don't know the value of a landscape. So we collaborate with not only the urban and rural people, but artists and the other stakeholders, and to revitalize the countryside. That's because to preparing the future urban disaster, those rural countryside is very key to make resiliency environment society in the future. Okay, it's my slide and lecture is all. So please give us question time. Sylvia.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Asahiro. Thank you for sort of bringing to us sort of slices of your experiences, and somehow through your lecture and also the different videos that you have showed, it feels kind of spiritual in some ways. And I think it's really interesting how the disaster, of course, it's very frightening, and people loses everything during these disasters, but somehow it makes the way you illustrate how you rebuild with the people, it really feels like the people grow closer because of this disaster. And involving the people who lost their homes to rebuild, it really helps them to heal through this experience. So I can really feel it through the different things that you do to the land itself, to solve technical issues, such as how when we went to the site last time, I remember we were thinking about how to deal with the trees that are around the river, because during the storm, all the trees, because the soil loosened and all the trees fell down, and then it blocks the flood. You know, very much different from Pokfulan village. It's because of the rubbish that actually blocks it. But in your case, it's because of these trees. And so we were thinking about what species to use in order to hold the soil better. So you're thinking on that level as well, and also on the level of the people. Yeah. Sorry, I kept going on and on. How about others? Anybody would like to ask questions or comment? Any students? You can also type your comments. And I cannot help to think about the craft ladies' works as well in the last slide, where you use the leaves to actually do the paintings, pretty much like how they do that by making the tie-dye shirts with the craft ladies, but instead it's paintings. So it's very similar, using using the plants around where they are.
Yeah, I just wanna have some comments that I really like the presentation, and especially the last one that they collect the plants from the field and make that cyanotype by the printing by the sunlight. That very interesting project, and you not only create the art, but you also allow yourself to connect with the nature and realize how the biodiversity of the place, and I think that's a really good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very fun because sometimes sun shading in the cloud and appear again. And we always seeing the sunlight.
Right.
When is the timing to quit?
Yeah.
It's a very nice artworks. Touch with the landscape.
Yeah.
And I also thought the soil tasting was quite interesting.
Yeah, that one. They
Yeah.
don't really taste it, right? They only smell it and listen to the story.
But when
Only
we think
smell it.
about, yeah, when we think about our lives now, I mean, most of the time, especially now, it's all Zoom. That, you know, when was the last time you actually smell a flower? You know, maybe not soil, but even the flower.
Yeah. I would really want to do that in my class, do that soil tasting experiment. Yeah.
Be careful.
Yeah.
Ma'am, be careful.
Yeah,
In
it's
Thailand, the soil is contaminated.
Yeah, it's kind of
It's
fun.
not
You kind of
from the
like,
forest.
yeah, but you kind of like get to really kind of awake your instinct, like, because sometimes you don't really pay attention of anything else, like, yeah, so it's good. Yeah, thank you for the lecture.
Yeah.
Thank you for the lecture. I have a question, but I think that the last part about socially engaged art, we do have a lot of takeaways for our group that is doing culture and land. Hi. But then the thing is, in Hong Kong, art seems to be quite controversial. Like, it sometimes can become like a cause of gentrification of a place. For example, I guess people from Hong Kong might have heard of this. There is a neighborhood called Sham Shui Po in Hong Kong. So it's one of the poorest districts in Hong Kong. There are lots of subdivided flats there, but due to lots of different reasons, there are a few years ago, there were lots of vacant shops in Sham Shui Po. And because of that, and also the low rent rate, some very impoverished artists started their studios there, or opened some cafes and art galleries, mini art galleries. But that kind of snowballed, and now it's so expensive that some of the initial artists who went in there, the pioneering ones, said that they can't afford the rising land rent anymore. So in the case of Park Fu Lam, I'm just wondering, yeah, it's nice to hold these kind of cultural and art activities, but how do we balance it so that it doesn't become like we don't change the nature of the village too much? Yeah. And yeah, that's my question. But I also want to share something, because the cyanotype is really interesting. I've also seen something similar in Hong Kong, but not in a very natural way. There is a district called To Kwa Wan in Hong Kong, and there is a 13 streets named after mythical creatures. Interestingly enough, these 13 streets are all car repairing shops. And so there are also a lot of Southeast Asians working and living there. So the artist, he brought in volunteers to work with those car repairmen and the Southeast Asians to create these pictures of the mythical creatures according to where the street is, using tools that they use to repair cars. Yes, and when I saw that, I just thought, wow, this is ingenious. Yes. Yeah, that's my sharing and my question. Thank you.
Thank you. So can you enlighten us, Professor?
Yeah.
How do we do it?
a difficult question. So socially engaged art focused on relationship.
Yes,
With
relationship.
each other. Yeah. So there are lots of artists there. So sometimes who only make the artworks and put it on the field. Sometimes it's good, but sometimes it's not good for local people if lacking the communication or landscape harmony or something. So, so we need to select the artist. Well, we need to ask artists, please make communication or please make effort to know what is the landscape, what is the community, what is the value before making artworks. So artworks is not so important. Artworks is just a media to making the communication or show the relationship. It's just media. So we need to be care about the art management if we do promoting the project before. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I have a question about reforestation. At the beginning of your example, we talk about the cause of the landslide, and one of that is about the mistake about the forest management that you said is even the forest make the landslide even worse, right? So I wonder what kind of forest in the during the disaster, because in Thailand we always promote that different layers of forest can protect the soil erosion, including the landslide. But in that case, from your video, I think maybe you have only one layer of the big tree, the forest. So when the landslide, the root of the big tree cannot hold the soil stable enough. So with the water, with the high amount of water, it makes the landslide and the whole tree collapse and then hit the village. So that caused a very worse disaster. So I wonder why the reforestation focus on the forest management, not go back to make the forest like the natural forest, to make that different layer. Is that question?
I'm not sure I'm catch everything or not. So yeah, the landslide and the vegetation and the forest relation is quite complicated. So forestation is efficient to preventing the landslide, but the limitation of the depth of the root, we think 2 meters. But if a landslide happen more than 2 meter depth, so what kind of tree grow above the landslide going to happen? So this is Japanese Forest Society mentioned things. But the other scholar pointed out, when collapsing the vegetation, the root cohesion against to the slide, so parallelism at the 3D dimension. So we are estimating those root cohesion. How to make root cohesion system? It is quite important to preventing the slide. But so 2 years ago, rain 1,000 millimeter in a day. So such a enormous rain, so any kind of slope may have collapse. So, and it depends on the soil type. So granite, if it's granite and soil depth is deeper, easy to collapse. But if there is no soil, there is no collapse. So it depends on the place to place. Yeah, it's quite difficult to evaluate before disaster. It's a challenging point. Yeah, as a landscape designer.
And I also add two comments about example of the artwork. Instead of testing the soil, so we make the soil painting. And also the tree, we can do eco printing. In the video, you can see how to make the very nice clothes using different kind of flower and different color of the leaves. And then you can make some dyeing. So I think if you remind me something like this, I'm afraid of testing soil in Thailand or even in Fukuoka because of the sewer system and the water quality is not that good. I mean, the soil absorbs something, so it could be contaminated.
Something. True. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else with questions? Yeah, I don't think there's anything in the chat either. Okay. Well, how do you feel? More fever or no fever now after you've
Yes, yesterday, the day of vaccination, I forgot this schedule. And yeah, fever.
Oops, can't hear you. Oh, sorry, we cannot hear you.
Your voice gone.
Can someone type?
Yeah.
I use Moderna vaccination.
Okay.
Yesterday.
We can hear now. Yes, yes.
Yeah, you're back.
Yesterday I've got Moderna vaccination and got fever today.
Okay, we'll let you rest now. Thank you so much for joining us again. Okay, can we have a round of applause?
Yeah, I hope you had a good continuous your workshop.
Yeah, very inspiring.